Months after Michael's death, David found himself spiraling, each day a deeper descent into the chasm of grief. The world had become a muted stage, the colors dimmed, the sounds muffled. His apartment, once a home filled with the boisterous laughter of a young boy and the comforting presence of a loving wife, now echoed with silence, a stark reminder of what he had lost. Evelyn's absence was a constant ache, a wound that refused to heal, and Michael was everywhere and nowhere, his memory a ghost that haunted every corner of the apartment. The photographs on the walls, the toys scattered in the closet, the half-finished drawings on the refrigerator, each a dagger twisting in his heart. He couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't find solace in anything. His work, once a source of pride and intellectual stimulation, now felt meaningless, a pointless exercise in a world devoid of joy. He had stopped going to therapy, finding the platitudes and empty reassurances of his therapist insulting to the depth of his pain. He felt utterly alone, adrift in a sea of despair, with no land in sight. It was during one of his sleepless nights, while aimlessly scrolling through obscure online forums dedicated to fringe technology, that he stumbled upon it, a whispered rumor of a device capable of capturing residual neural activity, the echoes of the recently deceased, the resonance implant. The idea was both horrifying and tantalizing, a dangerous path that promised to either heal him or destroy him completely. But David was beyond reason, beyond fear. He was desperate. He had to hear Michael's voice again, even if it was just a whisper, a fragment, a fleeting moment of connection. The search led him to Jonah, a name mentioned in hushed tones, a man operating in the shadows, a broker of forbidden technology. After weeks of cautious inquiries and encrypted communications, David finally secured a meeting. Jonah's warehouse was located in a derelict industrial district on the outskirts of the city, a place where the air hung heavy with the stench of decay, and the silence was broken only by the occasional screech of rats. The warehouse itself was a cavernous space, dimly lit by flickering fluorescent tubes that cast long, distorted shadows. The air was thick with dust and the smell of ozone, a testament to the illicit activities that took place within its walls. Stacks of crates, filled with strange and unidentifiable equipment, lined the perimeter, their contents shrouded in mystery. Jonah emerged from the shadows, a hulking figure with a shaved head, a scarred face, and eyes that seemed to have witnessed too much. He moved with the quiet confidence of a man who knew how to handle himself in dangerous situations. "You David Holt?" he asked, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. David nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. He tried to appear calm, but he knew his desperation was palpable. "I understand you're looking for something unusual," Jonah said, his eyes scanning David intently. "I heard you can get it," David replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "I can get anything for the right price. But this isn't something you just buy off the shelf. This is dangerous technology. It can mess with your head." "I know the risks," David said, his voice firm despite his inner turmoil. "Do you?" Jonah challenged, stepping closer. "Do you really know what you're getting into? This isn't a game, Holt. This is playing with forces you don't understand." David met Jonah's gaze, his eyes filled with a mixture of grief and determination. "I lost my son," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. "I need to hear him again. I don't care about the risks." Jonah studied David for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he sighed. "All right," he said, "but don't say I didn't warn you." He led David deeper into the warehouse, past the stacks of crates, to a small, secluded room in the back. The room was sparsely furnished with a metal table and 2 chairs. On the table sat a small, nondescript device, the resonance implant. It consisted of a pair of headphones connected to a small, metallic box with a few knobs and dials. It looked deceptively simple, but David knew it held the potential to unlock the secrets of life and death. "This is it," Jonah said, gesturing towards the device. "The resonance implant. It's not pretty, but it works. Or at least, it's supposed to." "How does it work?" David asked, his eyes fixed on the device. "It picks up residual neural activity," Jonah explained. "After someone dies, their brain still emits faint electrical signals for a short period of time. This device amplifies those signals, allowing you to hear the echoes of their thoughts, their memories, their voice." "And it really works?" David pressed, his voice filled with hope and disbelief. "Sometimes. It depends on a lot of factors. The condition of the brain, the time since death, the atmospheric conditions. It's not an exact science." "But there's a chance?" David asked, his eyes pleading. "There's always a chance," Jonah said. "But there's also a chance you'll hear things you don't want to hear. Things that will drive you mad." David ignored the warning. He reached out and picked up the headphones, his fingers trembling. "How much?" he asked, his voice barely audible. Jonah named a price, a sum that would have seemed exorbitant under normal circumstances. But David didn't hesitate. He pulled out a wad of cash from his pocket and handed it to Jonah. Jonah counted the money, then nodded. "It's yours," he said. "But remember what I said, Holt. Be careful with this thing. It's more powerful than you realize." David took the device and left the warehouse, his mind racing. He couldn't wait to get home and try it. He drove back to his apartment in a daze, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. The city seemed to blur around him, the lights and sounds fading into a distant hum. He was focused on one thing, and one thing only: hearing Michael's voice again. Back at his apartment, David locked the door and drew the curtains, shutting out the outside world. The apartment was filled with Michael's belongings, a shrine to a life cut short. David walked over to Michael's room, his heart aching with grief. He sat down on the bed, surrounded by Michael's toys and books. He picked up a teddy bear that Michael had loved, its fur worn and matted from years of hugs. He held it close to his chest, his eyes filling with tears. He missed Michael so much. He missed his laughter, his hugs, his endless questions. He missed being a father. He opened the box containing the resonance implant and took out the headphones. He hesitated for a moment, his hand hovering over the power button. He knew this was a dangerous path, a descent into the unknown, but he couldn't resist. He had to hear Michael's voice again. He put on the headphones and pressed the power button. The device crackled to life, filling his ears with static. He adjusted the dials, trying to find a clear signal. The static grew louder, interspersed with faint, distorted sounds. He strained his ears, trying to make sense of the noise. Then he heard it, a faint, distorted whisper, barely audible above the static. "Dad." David froze, his heart pounding in his chest. He couldn't believe it. It was Michael's voice, distorted, fragmented, but unmistakable. He adjusted the dials again, trying to amplify the signal. The whisper grew slightly louder. "It love you." David's eyes filled with tears. He was hearing Michael's voice again. He wasn't sure if it was real, if it was just a hallucination, but he didn't care. He was hearing his son. He listened intently, trying to catch every word, every syllable. The whisper faded in and out, interspersed with static and other distorted sounds. He heard fragments of sentences, snippets of memories, echoes of a life that was gone. "Wan Park, swing, high. A mommy, read, story. A dad, catch me. David wept, his body shaking with emotion. He was hearing Michael's voice, but it was also a reminder of everything he had lost. He listened for hours, lost in the echoes of the past. He didn't eat, didn't sleep, didn't move. He was completely absorbed by the device, lost in the whispers of the dead. As the night wore on, the whispers grew stronger, more coherent, but they were also interspersed with other voices, voices he didn't recognize, strange voices, alien voices, voices that spoke of things he couldn't understand. He tried to ignore them, focusing on Michael's voice. But the other voices grew louder, more insistent, until they drowned out Michael's whispers completely. He became frightened, disoriented. He didn't know what was real anymore. He didn't know who he was anymore. He was lost in a sea of whispers, adrift in a world of echoes. Finally, exhausted and terrified, he took off the headphones and collapsed onto the bed. He lay there for a long time, his mind racing, his heart pounding. He didn't know what to make of what he had heard. He had heard Michael's voice, but he had also heard other voices, voices that were strange and unsettling. He didn't know if the device was working properly, or if it was just messing with his head. He didn't know if he was closer to finding peace, or if he was descending into madness. All he knew was that he had to hear Michael's voice again. He had to find out what the other voices were. He had to know the truth, no matter how terrible it might be. He picked up the headphones again and put them on. The device crackled to life, filling his ears with static. He adjusted the dials, trying to find a clear signal. The whispers returned, faint and distorted. But this time, they were different. This time, they were calling his name. David's journey had begun, a descent into the abyss, fueled by grief and driven by an insatiable desire to reconnect with his lost son. He had opened a door to the unknown, unaware of the horrors that lay beyond, the cosmic forces that were now listening, watching, and waiting to claim him as their own. His apartment, once a sanctuary of memories, was now a gateway to another dimension, a nexus point where the veil between realities was thinning, and the whispers of the dead were becoming the harbingers of a terrifying future.